Hello, BookTube. I've got 10 more random books to discuss with you. A lot of you seem to be liking these videos. Certainly I'm having fun strolling down memory lane. So I thought we'd call up a few more books and see what we can find. Uh, okay, so we've already done you. Let's move on to... okay, great. This is by Eric Ives. This is The Life and Death of Anne Boleyn. The greatest biography of Anne Boleyn that's ever been done. Ives looks at not only the usual sources, which naturally concentrate on England, but all the other sources as well, and did a lot of apprentice work at other royal courts. And there are copious documentations of all of that stuff. Of course, the narrative is freighted towards the period when Anne becomes the second wife of King Henry VIII and the mother of his daughter Elizabeth. And knowing what's coming lends that narrative all the forward momentum that it needs. Is just a tremendously enjoyable reading experience, sharp as a tack in terms of scholarly writing. Just the Anne Boleyn biography to read if you're interested in reading biographies of the queens instead of the king. Okay, then we have a comic book. This is a collection of a few issues from the Batman comics. This is Death in the Family. This is a story that centers around the second Robin, not the original Dick Grayson Robin, but a new character taking up that identity once Dick Grayson had become Nightwing. The character is Jason Todd, and fans were a little bit ambivalent about whether or not they really embraced the idea of a replacement Robin and whether or not they really liked this particular Robin. And DC, in the wave of mega gimmicks that was possessing both superhero comic book companies at the time, decided to capitalize on that ambivalence in the most grotesque way imaginable, in the most cynical way imaginable. They published 2 phone numbers that fans could call. One would be a vote for Robin to live through his next encounter with the Joker, and the other was a vote for Robin to die. And the fans voted for Jason Todd to die. So he gets beaten to death with a crowbar. Squalid, meaningless death. Of course, this being comic books, it didn't take, but it certainly looked permanent at the time. It was done with very, very pro forma storytelling, and naturally any collection of a death in the family is going to have the alternate panels, because the artist, Jim Aparo, did not know how the vote was going to go. He had to draw both. He had to draw Batman finding Jason Todd's dead body and Batman finding Jason Todd battered but alive. And any collection that has this storyline is going to have that. It's not good Jim Aparo artwork. He is a legend. He was one of the greatest Batman artists, but he was, well, I hate to use the phrase, but it's undeniably true. It's something that an editor should have told him before I was saying it. He's undeniably past his prime in these issues. And also, naturally, I hate everything about Death in the Family. Of course I do. I hate the fact that there's a replacement Robin. Dick Grayson doesn't get any older. Why would he get any older? He's a fictional character. Why would he get any older? You don't need a replacement Robin. And if you have a replacement Robin, it's not suddenly that the Joker is going to start killing people, right? That he's going to start. If the Joker could reach out and kill a superhero, there are many millions of times where he would have killed Batman. And also, to add just the cherry on top of me hating this, is the characterization of Superman in this storyline, who knows perfectly well what the Joker has done and prevents Batman from taking any kind of revenge, because the Joker has some sort of bogus diplomatic immunity. I didn't know what to say about that at the time. I fired off an angry letter to the editor of this issue of Batman when I read it, especially the part about the follow-up issue where Superman acts like a stooge of the UN. I fired off a letter and said, I know that it's thanks to Dark Knight Returns, it's very fashionable to have Superman be a fascist lapdog, but there's no such thing as diplomatic immunity to commit murder. And I wasn't the only one to write in and say that, but it didn't take anyway. Jason Todd came back. Oh, great. Okay, then we have a kid's book. This is James Gurney. A lot of you will remember this book. This is Dinotopia. His kid's book that imagines a lost kingdom where dinosaurs and humans live in perfect happiness and peace next to each other, unlike humans and schnauzers. I've got a schnauzer who's going crazy here. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Don't you bite me. Gurney puts a huge amount of work into how this would work, into what that society would be like, what roles will the dinosaurs play, how intelligent are they, and the artwork is amazing. Dinotopia was a huge, huge phenomenon and spawned a whole bunch of spin-off books, but the first one is genuinely magical. Really wish I had a physical copy of it. There are some kids' books that an ebook just won't do, and this is one of them. I keep meaning to look for it, but I've almost never seen a used copy of Dinotopia, so maybe that speaks to its popularity. No, okay, then we have, this is Roger Zelazny, the author of the Nine Princes in Amber series, the great Amber cycle of novels. But Zelazny was an indefatigable writer. He wrote a lot of stuff, including a lot of standalone novels that I rather like, and this is one of them. This is Doorways in the Sand, which I guarantee you, I don't know, I've never met this author, and I don't know anything about the origin story of this novel, but I guarantee you I know the gimmick that started it. The gimmick that started this novel is the gimmick that organizes the opening chapters, in which our main character, an ordinary human schlub, has been told by an old relative of his that he can have a steady allowance of money until he finishes college. And he figures out, well, I like the steady income of money part, so I'd better never finish college. So he just stays forever and ever and ever. There are a couple of scenes at the beginning of the early chapters of this novel. There are a couple of scenes that are pure comic gold. Because by this point, I mean, when this novel starts, the college has long since wanted to get rid of this guy. Long since wanted to trick him into graduating. He knows everything. He knows every way to get around it, but they're still trying to do that. And I think that's the germ that started this whole thing. And I think Zelazny just thinks up a science fiction plotline that extrapolates from there. It turns out to be a very good science fiction plotline. This is a really good author. So even when he's writing, I believe that he was pulling this entire thing seat of the pants style straight out of his tuchus. I don't believe there was any planning involved here. I don't believe this thing ever got edited in any serious way, and I don't think there'd be any point to it. But it ends up being more than just a serio-comic romp. There are some pretty touching scenes as this thing gains steam. Again, don't have a print and paper copy of it. Kind of wish I did. Oh my, okay. Oh well. All right, I mentioned with Dinotopia that some kids' books really can't be reproduced electronically. Not the wonder of them. And this one is a perfect example. I don't know how you would do this short of holographic technology. This is, some of you will know this is Encyclopedia Prehistorica, Dinosaurs. And this picture on the cover is not going to do this thing justice. This was a pop-up book. And it was an astonishing pop-up book. Just astonishing. Every page opens up and a dinosaur, some aspect of dinosaur reality, unfolds to be three-dimensional when you open the page. And there were little pocket inserts all around the pages that you could open up for smaller things. And very, very instructive. Very, very much designed to use that wonder, the wonder of the construction of this book, to teach kids about dinosaurs and paleobiology and whatnot. Culminating, of course, in Tyrannosaurus Rex, who not only unfolds when you open his page, but seems to lunge at you. It's just amazing. Talk about a book that cannot be reproduced. Unfortunately, because of how complex and delicate this thing is, it's almost impossible to find a working copy in the wild. Almost impossible to find a second-hand copy of this. This is a marvelous, delicate thing, so children were deadly to it. I was in a bookstore. I was working in bookstores when this arrived, and it was wrapped. We got one copy that we were told we could open. So obviously with a thing like this, once you can open it and see what it does, you've sold a copy of the book. It's not, but you won't sell it if you can't do that. So of course we had to open one of them. And I was so tempted. I was so tempted to get one of these myself. For myself. I'm a huge dinosaur fan. But there was no chance. There was no chance that my dogs would have left it alone. They would have torn it apart, or I would have ruined it. So I didn't do that. And I probably still wouldn't. If by some weird chance I were to find this out in the wild in a used bookstore and it were to work, page is not ripped, everything's still working, I might get it. But I would get it for the parent of a kid some parent that I know. I wouldn't get it for myself. I wouldn't keep it for myself. But what an experience, though. All right. Then we have Penguin Classics. This is the Ethics of Spinosa. I don't remember who does this translation, but of course the translation that you would want for the Ethics of Spinoza would be by a little-known novelist called George Eliot. That's what you would want. But with the Penguin Classic edition, you get the usual Penguin Classic extras. You get the notes and the introduction and whatnot. And I remember this. I had this copy once upon a time, and I remember the translation being very good. And this is Spinoza grappling with life, the universe, and everything. This will feature prominently in the year of philosophy, of bro philosophy reading that I do with Grix in 2024. Okay, all right. This is Tom McNabb. I had a chance to get this. I had a chance to get a hardcover of this at the Brattle just a few weeks ago or a few months ago, and I didn't. This is a novel called Flanigans Run. And it's the story of the early years of the 20th century when an entrepreneur, a huckster, a P.T. Barnum figure, decides to create a cross-country run. And he's willing to scoop up just about anybody who's willing to participate in it. And that gives rise to the core cast of characters here, not all of whom are professional runners at all when things start. A few of them are just ordinary people. One of them, very memorably, talks about how she had never even run around the block until this whole idea took root in her mind. And it follows Flanigans Run. That's the name of the event. It follows Flanigans Run all across the country. It's amazingly good. Just a wonderful cheer from the sidelines novel. And it came out in hardcover with a fairly boring cover. It didn't look like this. And then when it came out in mass market paperback, the publishers gave it multiple covers, which was not very common at the time. This would have been in the late 70s, early 80s that these paperbacks came out. And the paperback covers looked like the one that I'm showing here in this arrangement. That the legend up there, and then one of the main characters prominent, and a background of historical stuff. But it was a different main character for each of the alternate covers, and one of those alternate covers appealed to Steve immensely. So that was the copy that I have, long since gone. So now, Flanigans Run is the all-time holy grail paperback for me. I would love to reread the book, but I want the mass market paperback with the variant cover that I particularly like. And the chances of me ever seeing that, even at the Brattle Bookshop, are virtually non-existent. So, but I still strongly recommend it. All right. Well, we go back to kids' books. I guess we've got a little theme going here. This is the Library Lion. Can you make that out there? This is a wonderful kids' book, just wonderful, about the magic of libraries, and also in a low-key way, a way that kids will absorb, but they won't feel like they're being taught anything. Also, the importance of courtesy and of following rules comes out in this book too, because the setting is a library that is overseen by a caring, not a villain at all, not really, a caring but strict librarian who has all sorts of rules. You don't run in the library. You are very quiet in the library. You are courteous to others in the library. You pay attention to what you're doing and are careful about the books in the library. And the kids are so caught up in the spell of the library and of reading that they are happy to abide by those rules. But one day, a lion enters the library. The lion doesn't want to eat anybody, as lions would if it weren't a kid's book. The lion doesn't want to eat anybody, but the rules don't apply to a lion. There's nothing in the librarian's rules about what a lion can or cannot do in the library. And it's delightful. Just delightful. It throws into relief the idea of following the rules and things that might be more important than following the rules. Lovely. And the whole, the language, the atmosphere that the whole thing is breathing is the wonder of libraries, which is great. Oh man, another kid's book. Oh, okay, this is Jim LaMarche. This is The Raft. This was utterly magical. Just utterly magical. About a boy who gets sent to his grandmother's house in the woods of Minnesota, and doesn't really want to go there. He doesn't really want to do any of the chores that she has set for him. She also is not a villain. But a raft comes down the river, and it kind of makes this a portal fantasy Only they don't go through a portal. The raft is the portal to a change in this boy's attitude, to him learning how to see the wonders all around him and come to love them. Just magical. Just magical. This is a really good example of the kind of kids book that I sometimes find myself wondering what a kid would get out of it. Adults will love it. Absolutely love it. I guess what kids would get out of it would just be the beautiful pictures of animals, right? I mean, you could definitely, I could easily picture this being a kid's favorite kids book. We're not going to keep doing kids books, though, are we? Oh, no, we're not. Okay, well, this next one's not a kids book at all. This is by Dr. Jeff Meldrum, and this is his book, Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science. Jeff Meldrum is a professor at, I forget the university, but it's in the Pacific Northwest, I think. And he is a primate foot specialist. His specialty is foot morphology in primates. And he has looked at the legend of the Sasquatch, of Bigfoot, especially in North America. And if you know anything about Bigfoot in North America, you know that 99.9% of anything that passes as evidence is tracks, plaster casts of tracks. That is how it all started. Before Patterson and Gimlin had their film of whatever it is, whether it's a guy in an ape suit or whether it's an unknown anthropoid crossing a creek bed, before that film, there were newspaper stories about tracks. That's how Bigfoot got its name. And Jeff Meldrum is one of the only academics that looked at those tracks and said, well, rather than dismiss them out of hand, I'm going to examine what these actually are. What are these things? Are they obvious hoaxes? And according to him, they are not. According to him, a large number of them are not. According to him, a large number of those tracks would require a primate foot morphology expert in order to produce them. A normal person, a person without the education in how primate feet work, wouldn't even know how to make a cast like this. Wouldn't know how to make a track like this. He was also one of the first people to point out, he points it out in this book over and over again, that the standard idea of a human prankster wearing a cardboard Bigfoot underneath his shoe like a snowshoe wouldn't work. That wouldn't produce these things. Try it is basically what Dr. Meldrum is saying here. He's saying, try it. Put those two things on your boots and walk across a wet riverbed where a lot of tracks are found. They're found near water. See what kind of a track trail you leave behind. It doesn't look anything like the things that have been cast. So although many of them are hoaxes, he's firmly of the opinion that many of them are not. And if they aren't hoaxes, well, there's a whole library, a whole room, a whole building full of books on Sasquatch, but there are only about 10 or 11 that are actually worth having, that are actually worth reading, and his is one of them, very much so. Okay, then we have Stephen Bauer, but not the is there something below D-list for an actor? What about E-list, F-list? The F-list actor, Stephen Bauer, this is not that Stephen Bauer. This is a fantasy author called Stephen Bauer. I don't know if Stephen Bauer's ever written anything else. I've only ever read this book by him. It's Saturday, a fantasy novel in which a boy and a satyr, this mythological creature with a tail and hooves, I think Mr. Tumnus from Narnia, square off against the Lord of all evil, the Dark Lord in this novel, who is a gigantic, extremely malevolent owl. Oh my. The original trade paperback of this, I've never seen this in a hardcover. I've never seen it in a mass market paperback, and I almost never see the trade paperback. Almost never. And the trade paperback has illustrations that are very good. And this is it's a standard fantasy story. The boy assembles a small team of supernatural beings who will help him to fight against the owl and the forces of darkness. And it's quite good. If I ever saw a trade paperback of this in the wild, I would snap it up. I'd happily reread it. Okay, all right. I don't know what this is doing here, but we'll go until we get to the end of this row. This is a fantasy novel called A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin. And this is the original high fantasy artwork for the cover, for the mass market cover. This is, of course, the opening salvo in the epic fantasy series, A Song of Ice and Fire, that Martin didn't live to finish. And this opens with the story. It plumps you right down in the middle of things with warring households. In later interviews, Martin often said that he patterned this off of the Wars of the Roses. And you read these books, and you can definitely see it. This first book, A Game of Thrones, has all of the strengths of what would go on to be the remaining books in the series and all of its weaknesses. It's extremely profuse in its imagination. This is one of those rare epic fantasy worlds that you can just live in. You can just go there and live in it. Every fantasy author tries for that, but almost none of them actually do it. And this one does, right from the beginning. Right from the beginning. The opening scene of the book touches on a very creepy, no pun intended, chilling evidence of the supernatural. But you are all the while getting gradually, and then in huge buckets, huge torrents, you are getting the sociological and political backstory of all of these families and all of these different places, as they all gradually, it doesn't really kick off in this first book, they all gradually realize that they are collectively facing an existential threat, even while they are existential threats to each other. So those strengths are on display in this book. Unfortunately, the weaknesses are on display as well. George R.R. Martin was told for years by friends of his that an ongoing epic fantasy series is a way to print money. If you do it and it catches on, there's nothing like it anywhere in the publishing world. And he resisted forever and ever. And then he decided to do it, and it turned out to work. To put it mildly, it turned out to work. But one of the elements of those epic fantasy stories that he imitates here and does a little poorly. In fact, the first time I read this, right when the paperback came out, I actually thought that it was irony. I thought that he was sending it up. And that is the merciless overwriting of most fantasy series. He indulges in that enormously. And it was only really, I think, in the second book that I realized, no one could keep up a parody this long. No, he's just doing this. He has tapped into this aspect of his own self as a writer and is doing this. It worked. It definitely works. And then we can finish up with romance. This is Mary Baylow, one of the nicest people in the romance world. This is Under the Mistletoe, appropriate for Christmas. This is a collection of short stories and a little bit longer stories, all centered around not only a Christmas theme, but a Christmas redemption theme. Mary Baylow is not a brittle or a real world or ripped from the headlines romance author. Her romances are designed very much to make you care about her authors and to leave you happy. Happier even than most other romance authors do. And it works. Every one of these stories works. One of them is much stronger than the others, but I'm sure that they were all written with relatively the same process. So that is a leaf blower. That is going to be the third leaf blower who is murdered today by the Boston Police Department. I can practically hear the sirens now. They're probably coming to execute that person. This is the 3 people today that have died in a fusillade of bullets. But we'll press on. We'll finish up with this book since there's a leaf blower involved. But I strongly recommend Mary Baylow for anything. She's written 1 million books. I strongly recommend all of them. If you want the kind of romance that she writes, which is peaceful, sweet, clean, wholesome, and uplifting, which is not a bad thing. I mean, if you tried to write a romance like that, you would probably fail. I would probably fail. It's a skill on its own. But there you go. There are some random books for you. A little bit distracted here at the end. I'm going to wrap up this video and then just wait. It's gruesome to watch police show up in a half-moon cordon around someone with a leaf blower, order them to drop it. Of course, they have to do that for legal reasons, but the person isn't human anymore. They can't drop the leaf blower. They are consumed by it. So they're going to have to die in a hail of bullets, and then you use a drone to pry the leaf blower out of their hand, which is still holding it. You can't pry it out yourself, because if you touch it, then you are subsumed by it, and then if you're a man and you have a small pecker, then you will be subsumed by it, and you will also need to be shot to death, shot off the device. It's kind of macabre, but since the victim isn't human anymore, it does make for fun viewing. so I'm gonna wrap this video up and just go watch. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.